Before we begin, if anyone's speaking this evening, we please ask that all individuals sign in here. We also ask that if you have any type of diagrams, renderings, elevations, set them flat facing this board so it can be picked up by camera. If you do need to speak to one another, it kind of disturbs us from hearing those that are speaking, so please take it in the hallway so we can hear those that are talking, speaking. We're going to be courteous to one another and also courteous to time. As of right now, no time will be involved. However, if it seems to be a little challenging, we will have to do so based on that discretion. We're going to start this meeting first with a motion to open.
I make a motion that we open this meeting of the Board of Architecture Review and Historic Preservation on January 22nd, 2018.
I second the motion.
Been moved by Christina, seconded by Susan. All in favor? It's Christina.
Aye.
All right. Susan and Jeff, your aye as well.
Aye, yes.
Welcome to the January 22nd, 2018 meeting of the Architectural Board of Review and Historic Preservation. My name is Curtis Highsmith, and I am your chair. I'd like to introduce our panel for this evening. We have Christina Redding, we have Susan Stevenson, along with Jeff Broadleaf. We'd like to welcome our historic consultant, Zach Studenroth, our legal counsel, Bo Robinson, and to, as always, as well as Charlie. We welcome you all. We're going to start this evening's meeting with signs and first application, please.
The first application is for BP Service Station, and I think there's only one set. They came in today.
Okay.
I've seen it.
Your name for the record, sir.
My name is Andrew Stewart from High Point Engineering.
Okay.
How are you doing this evening?
Doing well. You submitted one full set.
We submitted 3 sets last week of updated plans to the building department.
Okay.
I guess only one set got you. I have additional copies here if you
The plans you submitted a few weeks ago, because these were received today.
Isn't
should
there a
be a-
lighting plan change?
Yes, there should be a revision date on there of 12/29/17 on the right side in the revision box. I submitted plans last week.
Okay, so, do you have more plans there? Because the plans I have were received on the 22nd. But if you say you have additional plans, you
I
can
do,
submit
yes.
those for the file.
Of course.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right, sorry, sir. There you go.
That's fine. I have more if you need them.
Okay. Let's go over your presentation.
Yeah, so when I was here last time, concerns, of course, were lighting on this site, and as well as there was a suggestion or a recommendation to not reface the freestanding signs, but to propose monument signs at the property, something less of an impact for the surrounding area. So we went back to the client, spoke with them. As you can see, and I'll give you a moment to take a look at the plans, they are proposing putting in monument signs in place of the existing freestanding signs. Reduced area, I think the one on the south corner along North Sea Road is approximately the same area, but the other one's a reduced area, obviously reduced height to 6 feet. Again, with the freestanding sign reface.
One in your diagram, so those who are watching
I apologize.
can follow you.
This isn't.
So here we'd be replacing the existing freestanding sign with the proposed monument.
Okay.
And on this plan, of course, in the south corner here, in the same location, proposing to replace
Andrew,
the freestanding.
I don't have a benefit of that plan, so can you share with us, the public, the dimensions of the monument?
That's why he's showing it as
Right,
a
okay.
report, so the public can see. Those are the plans that were submitted as part of the file.
Right, okay. So again, the dimensions?
Do you have the newest plans up there?
Yes.
Okay. So currently, this existing freestanding sign, double pole sign, has an overall square footage of 60.6 square feet. We're proposing a monument sign of about 35 square feet here. We have to move it a bit from its current location just to make sure it fits in the property lines and the landscaped area within the curb line there.
And if I may, Andrew, the size of the lettering and the LED lights?
I believe they're about 10 inches high, the lettering.
Yep, thank you.
You're still proposing a backlit sign, though, correct? It's still a...
It is illuminated, but the entire sign is not illuminated. It's It would be just the starred, the lettering, and the LED, so the white and the green would not be illuminated.
So
It would be
90% of the sign.
Yeah, so, about 80-90% would not be illuminated.
Well, I mean, it's
Fine.
my question, my challenge before, and again, I did drive by golf several times. I did not see it, now that it changed. Did not see the sign ever backlit. I don't recall it ever being backlit. It may have had the capacity to do so, but I've never actually seen it being used. I know on the other side of the road, which is the town side,
Yes.
there are signs, and I believe even further down, there's a gas station with backlit signs in what you're proposing.
I
On
don't
this one,
have-
we've been very,
I understand. I don't have the photos with me, but the last time I had submitted photos of the nighttime illumination on the signs on the property, the existing signs.
you don't have it.
They were, I believe, I saw the gentleman, Jeff, had a package with the photos that I brought last time. There you go.
You have it? Okay.
Oh, this, like this?
Yes, so that's on the site right now.
This lit?
Yes.
Okay.
And similar with the other sign, that was taken at the site during one of the last meetings.
Christine, you had questions? Say no? I'm sorry. Okay. Susan, questions?
I have an issue with the actual LED lights, that I don't see any. The only place I've seen out here was at exit 70 at the Cumberland, and I think they really are unattractive and inappropriate for that spot.
The lights would have a dimming feature, so that at nighttime, they would be about 30% of what they are during the day.
But they're green, is that correct?
They are green. It's a standard color for BP.
Right.
BP
Well, you kind
for gas stations.
I get the green and yellow, since in many of these gas stations out here, they don't have a lot of branding on the pumps. You put BP everywhere that you could.
Okay. That's just how they brand their stations.
So
I understand.
there's plenty of it, but I think that the reduction in the size of the sign is great. Are there signs that are monuments that don't have that kind of LED light?
BP typically likes to have LEDs. If it becomes an issue, I can go back to them, but
Right.
it's obviously...
I've actually
something that-
gone on the internet and looked up a gazillion BP signs.
They're
There's a
older.
million different kinds of things.
I understand.
This is the newer,
It is the newer.
more in your face, as far as I'm concerned, lighting in terms of prices. Because, for instance, across the street, there's absolutely no indication of what price any gasoline is.
I understand.
and-
That's kind of a unique situation, that Cumberland station.
Yeah, but if you drive east, there are no LED lit service station signs with the price. There are prices, but it's more modest the way it was before.
You still have a problem, even with the dimming lights, you would just have a problem
Who's
with it.
dimming
It
them?
wouldn't be
I
very...
mean, I think it's I think it's tacky, I think is what I think. It's not, that is the entrance to the village. That was what brought this whole thing on. That when you turn, it doesn't need to be tacky. I mean, we are trying to work with you, I swear.
We're trying to work
But,
with you as well.
yeah,
I appreciate
but
that.
I just feel like that is my only objection to anything you've presented. And I know that you tried to have dark sky lighting. I looked at the lighting plan. I think you've done a really good job of that.
We've actually gone further with that, because I know you still had problems with it last time. We went back to them, and they're proposing to put in new LEDs on the canopy. I believe maybe about 40% of what they are now.
Great. No, I heard all that.
Okay.
Chris Talbot told me that in the building department.
Oh,
I was
okay.
really impressed by it.
Great.
But my concern is that that is anomalous out here, those kinds of lights on service stations,
Okay.
and that it's inappropriate for, unfortunately, it is the entrance to the village. It's not a superhighway. This isn't Route 69. It's none of that. It's just, it is the turning into the village.
Okay.
About 68, but okay.
Okay, so
No, I know that.
in terms of the monument sign, yeah, I very much appreciate that. And as long as the lettering is less than 12 inches, I'm okay with that. As far as the LED, it's a smart look, but I can also see your point. And several years ago, the town, the village, excuse me, squashed your neon lights, and LEDs are sort of like today's neon to some extent.
You still have a series of backlit signs. You have the backlit neon logo above the canopy, then you have a goose down light.
No, we've removed the gooseneck lighting on the canopy.
Okay.
So there'll be non-illuminated
So
as well as the fascia.
this style's gone, is that what you're saying?
Correct, that's an older.
Well, will there be, I'm sorry, just to
Yes.
add on to what you were saying, will there still be the BP logo? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Curtis.
On the canopy face and the sign, there won't be any illumination. And the building will have no illumination either. Right now, the only illuminated signs we're looking for are these monuments.
So none of the canopies will be illuminated, is that what you're saying?
Oh, no,
That's what,
they're-
yeah.
Well, the canopy's illuminated.
Well, the
What
canopy
is it?
lights, the downlights, yes.
The
but
downlights on
the signage and the face of the canopy will be non-illuminated.
non-illuminated?
Right, no
Not
gooseneck light.
not backlit, no goose down
Nope.
light. So you're basing your advertisement on the signs that are on the property itself, not necessarily the canopy, is that where?
Correct, yeah. I mean, obviously, the canopy will be visual during the day,
But
but less so during
the
the night.
canopy will still have the BP green and yellow stripe.
Yes, it just won't be
And
illuminated.
the
But it won't
pumps,
be illuminated, is
Right,
what
yeah,
I'm
that's
saying.
fine, yeah, it's good.
That makes a difference.
Yeah.
Because if it's going to be all of this, I looked at it, I saw the canopy, I saw the goose down, I saw the backlit, then I see the other signs, and it just looks like a big glowing parking lot.
Understood.
The canopy not glowing, because that's basically what I see, glowing at nighttime, I think minimizes a lot of the overall impact. The fact that if we can put as part of an approval, and I don't know how you can, or if you can, a wattage or you said it's a dim, it has the capacity of dimming. Is there a measure of that dimming that can be part of an approval where it's maximized? And I don't know who's going to manage that, but can it be a part of an approval process?
Yes, the plans, the most recent plans that were provided show the existing as it is with the current light fixtures, as well as proposed reduced light fixtures.
Okay, council, if to put that type of provision in an approval, building department would be responsible, or code enforcement, would be responsible for enforcing the illumination, correct?
Yes,
All right. Okay. Thank you.
you just have to specify it,
As part of the
they
approval.
understand what they're enforcing.
Okay. I would need to know what those tints of dimming are, so it would be a part of the approval if I were to decide on this application.
For the canopy downlights?
No, for these, for the signs, for the
Okay,
yard
for
signs.
okay.
For the, where you're going to have backlit, you'll have the pricing, to have that at a degree where we know at least what the specific tint will be, and that will be part of the approval process. Is there a way to measure that, and that be a part of the approval?
Yes, we can get you those.
And Curtis, so are you asking for backlit pricing or the LED pricing?
Backlit pricing,
Okay.
So, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, please.
and LED.
Okay, so you'd like to see the LED and then non-LED and the differences between? Okay.
Correct. And then we would be able to gauge our approval, and that approval will be based on that. And is that something from the site person, a person who's at the gas station, would he or she be able to also measure that to ensure that he or she is at that level every night?
They could probably check a meter. I think what they would look at is installing a device that automatically dims the lighting based on the ambient light. I think it would look at maybe 0.3 foot candles, and I know this is a lighting term, above ambient level. So as it gets darker, the light signs would automatically dim.
Okay.
So I could probably provide you specifications or something on that.
That would help me move further on the application now that I know it's not a big neon parking lot. Anything else from the board? Chris, Jeff?
no, no.
Susan, do you agree or disagree?
The only thing I disagreed with was the LED of the price. Everything else seemed fine to me because they had reduced the lighting, they have dark skies, they've really made
If
an
they're able to
attempt.
dim the amount of impact with the neon price, would that be,
No,
you still wouldn't, okay.
I think it doesn't look good, that's really what I think.
Christine?
I agree with Susan, I'm not happy with that lighting.
Okay, you don't have the votes on the lighting of the
Price.
price.
Okay, so we'd have to
don't have the votes on that, so maybe go back to the...
What's existing there now, kind of like that.
Anything else?
Translucent.
Yeah, that's just ginormous, and but on that monument, that would be great.
Okay. I'll have to go back to my client, of course, if that's something that they should be able to do.
The example for that is actually at the Shell station down the street.
Okay.
They have essentially a six-foot sign, and they have backlit pricing. So there is an example on 27 that fits that.
Right, and the other Shell station, too, toward Watermill.
Right.
All the way
And-
east.
Yeah, and then the Speedway and the Sunoco, the same thing. So, I mean, we would be consistent with the other signs.
Okay, understood.
Great.
Can I ask two things quick? I just want to make sure the only issue is the LED lighting. There's no other issues with anything else that's proposed right now?
You will also be giving us the measure of tint?
Yes.
For this, yes.
My other question is that, so the monument signs were under one application because they have one contractor doing those, a different contractor is doing the building and the canopy. It's just the way they have it set up. Is there any way to get an approval just on the canopy and building signage?
You have
and
two
come
separate
back
building
for-
applications with us?
There's multiple applications for the different, for the building signage, fascia, canopy signage, fascia, and then the what they call it, the monument sign.
But the rest of it.
So are you asking for approval on the canopy?
If you don't have issues with the canopy and the building, I was hoping maybe you could get approval on that. Obviously, the canopy downlights would be tied into any approval you might have that way. So maybe they can start to do that aspect of the work while we work out the details on the MIDs, on the...
Board members, do you have any concerns or issues with approving that portion of the application while he comes back with the additional information on the monument signs? Jeff?
No, I
No, I don't.
I don't either.
Okay. Is there any public comment on the application?
Might I just ask one more question this is actually for your benefit, and Bo, this is a question to you as well. The pylon signs
Yes.
exist because of a variance.
Right.
And there was a sunset law on the books. I think it's 11613. I can give you the quote. So inasmuch as he's altering this sign to another non-conforming sign, would he not need a variance approval, even though he has our blessings?
When you say variance, what variance are you talking about? Is that variance from the
It's
Board
in the
of Appeals?
file.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would he have to go back to them?
The
At some
increasing
point.
size of the...
No, it's not
It would
decreasing.
depend on what specifics were in the variance.
I think it said you could have 2 signs on the building and two signs freestanding, period. It
Yeah,
wasn't
but
very
so
specific.
there were no specific as to the
No,
lighting or
it
anything
was,
else.
you know,
So I would say would
in the
not have to
dark
go back
days.
to the Board of Appeals. Because your jurisdiction would supersede that as far as the technicalities of the lighting.
Okay.
I had it, but I don't have it with me.
But there was a variance.
Any other questions, Jeff, Susan?
No. That was it? No.
Any further comments from the public? Nothing further for Christine? So we'll start first with the canopy. Yeah.
The scary thing is,
That hurt you, probably.
ouch.
All right, so on the canopy, motion to approve the front elevation canopy, right side elevation, and rear.
Okay, I make a motion that for the BP service station, we approve the front elevation canopy, the right side elevation, and the rear.
Motion was for Christine, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second from Susan, all in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well.
I apologize, this is also the building sign, it's not illuminated with the fascia.
All right, let me just...
Sorry,
Okay.
appreciate your time.
What's the building sign on the little?
It's just a shop sign that's
Shop?
on, yeah, it'd be non-illuminated.
It's non-illuminated, yeah, it's not, it's just on
Okay.
the building itself.
Yeah, that's okay.
So there has to be a motion to do so.
Do you have a piece of
Chris-
paper that shows that anywhere?
So we're okay with that?
1 second. Sir, did you supply a rendering showing the
We
sign
did.
on the building?
There's one.
Is this the,
That's there's a newer version of that I was sent in for the package, but yes, that should be it.
do you happen to have that
I do have additional copies.
so that we know exactly
Yes,
what you're
of course.
proposing? Well, I want to see from his version so that I know I have it in mind.
Just provide a little more detail.
What is the date of that rendering?
It's a revision number 2, dated 12/29/17. It's on the left side. On the right side of the drawing, I apologize.
That's about it. Do you have 2 versions on your hand?
I do, I have 2 copies of
And
those.
those one, and then we'll have those stamped.
That's the signed application.
And you also stamp the approval.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. The motion would be to approve the building sign, non-illuminated, that would be fixated on the structure itself. It's just in the front elevation,
Correct.
just in the front elevation.
Is that the building sign or the shop sign?
This is the shop sign.
I make a motion that we approve the BP service station on County Road 39, the shop sign on the front elevation.
Motion by Christina, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan, all in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. There you go.
All right.
So now there'll be a adjournment
Yes.
till our next meeting,
Yep.
so that you can bring back the information for the,
Monuments.
Lighting.
like, lighting details.
Definitely.
Do you have any questions or issues?
I don't believe so, no.
Asking this board to adjourn so you can prepare yourself.
Yes, please.
Motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn until our next meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant BP service station request to adjourn to our next meeting.
Motion by Christina, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan, all in favor. Christina? Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next sign application, please.
Next sign application is M. Farron Construction for a contractor sign. The applicant present.
Is the applicant present?
It's not on my agenda either.
Okay.
It's
Motion to
kind-
adjourn? Contractor sign, name of the company, telephone number, license and issue. Looks like it's just a realtor sign, probably temporary while the applicant's doing work on the parcel. Any issue with the design?
Well, I'd take out PH, but that would be me.
Okay.
And I'd center it, and it might look nicer.
I don't have a problem with the PH. Do you have a problem
No,
with the
it's-
PH?
Okay, let them
Christina, you
have
have a problem with the PH?
You know, they have to tell you it's
I
the
don't think they
phone.
need it. It's,
Yeah, it'd look nicer without it.
Just cross it out and okay it without the PH.
Well, the applicant's not here to defend.
That's
his
all right.
right- His or
He
her
can
right
come
not
back.
to. If you think it's worth adjourning it to the next meeting for the PH, you can do so. Is that what you think? Christina?
No.
Susan?
Oh, she does? No, I don't care. I do think that, no, I would hope that it didn't have, I think that looks awkward. But I don't really think it's that important to detail it.
I don't think
but
it's
not
that
here.
important, and I think
All right,
we
let
should
them have
okay
it.
and let it go through.
Motion?
Any public comment on the application? Motion to
Did we show
approve.
it to them? Show it to them.
Here's the yard sign temporarily that will be there with a PH, which I would assume would mean telephone or phone number.
Right, but, okay.
All right.
I'm making a motion. Make a motion that we approve the construction sign for M. Farron Construction.
Okay. Motion was by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor? Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff? Aye. And I'm an aye as well. That concludes our sign permits for this evening. First application, historic. The applicant has requested this application adjourn until May, not specifically. I'm sorry? Is it adjourned until next one?
okay.
So that, there's no further adjournment necessary. We fall on the same adjournment. Next application.
The next application is 472 First Neck Lane. file for him? Wasn't there a file for that?
No, it's just in there.
Hi, my name is John Bennett, and I represent the applicant. I might be a little bit longer than the last presentation. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, that's what they used to call BP. Sorry? The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, that's what they used to call BP. In any event, let me tell you what we're going to do this evening. We'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll do it, and we'll tell you what we did, which is, I guess, the first lesson that they give you in homiletics. So I'm here this evening, going to give a bit of a presentation. Mr. Fox is here. Mr. Fox, who's one of the principals of the applicant, would like to say a few words. Bob Smith is here. Bob Smith is probably the most storied surveyor on the East End, former president of the New York State Land Surveyors Association. Bob's here to talk about the length of the original 1928 northerly addition. Frankly, and I think based upon some of the colloquy and based upon some of what I've seen in Mr. Studenroth's report, it's not necessarily critical, but we would like to show you that how confident we are and that Mr. Smith's original measuring of the house at approximately the northerly addition as approximately 32 and a half feet is spot on, and the objectant's measuring of the house of about 7.5 feet less is faulty. We also have Lisa Zaloga, who's the project architect, is going to give you some information on that as well. She submitted a letter to that effect, and also take you through some of the new elevations. Just very briefly.
John, was this just given to us this evening?
Yes.
No, yeah. Well, some of it is. Some of it is.
On with that.
No, I'm going to ask for an adjournment, not to worry. So, but I do want to have Mr. Smith's testimony in. He's here this evening, and Ms. Zaloga. We did receive Mr. Studenroth's report regarding his comments on the latest change, and we did make changes in response to Mr. Studenroth's report. What you see before you is the elevation, the easterly elevation prior to our response to Mr. Studenroth's report. That's on your right, far right, and then the changes as a result of Mr. Studenroth's report. And we also have an outline of the 1920s house as it relates to the proposed addition, as well as the proposed house after additions, as well as the proposed house after additions and the 1928 house. Before bringing up Mr. Fox, I do want to talk to you about two statements, one from one of the board members and one from Mr. Studenroth, that have been our touchstone in how to respond and how to change the presentation and the application to what you see before you right now. So you'll remember that this is a significantly different application than originally came in to see you, that we came in to see you with. So how did we get there? Well, we listened very seriously to the board members. We listened very seriously to Mr. Studenroth. We listened very seriously to Joel Snodgrass, our own historic consultant. And this is what we have before you now. But again, there are a couple of really critical statements, two touchstones that have guided our thinking throughout. One was on the November 27th board meeting. Mr. Broadley noted as follows, and this is a verbatim quote. There was mention by Mr. Snodgrass about balancing historic intentions with property rights, and I think the basis of that exists, and that additional space can be had, and the property can maintain its historic nature by reverting back to the 1920 image. There's a lot of space in that. I'm sure creative architects and interior designers can come up with contemporary uses and applications of that added space, but that would be such a plus to the community if we were to return this jewel of Southampton back to what it was in the images in the 1920s, and yes, changed over time, but 1920 is 100 years ago. I'd like to see us at least preserve that as much as we could, and I think in doing so, the applicant would get a considerable amount of space, and hopefully that would address their personal needs. So, and that was the photograph that I displayed to all the board members. Mr. Broadleaf was not the only one who acted affirmatively, so the other board members, but I think it's fair to say that his comments succinctly put forth the feelings of the board and has guided us. Now, the other thing that we looked at, and I sort of sensed this coming in some of Mr. Studenroth's comments, but he put it succinctly in his latest report. And I'll just read that paragraph before I ask Mr. Fox to come up. But again, this has been our touchstone and our guiding language for us. And this is Mr. Studenroth, your consultant. As recommended in the prior report, Mr. Studenroth's prior report, an appropriate solution to enlarging the house within the objectives of the code may be found in the massing and detailing of the proposed additions. New plan references historical design precedents for its inspiration. By repeating the architectural vocabulary of the original house, and by stepping the additions back from the facade of both the first and second stories, which you can see it does, it also achieves the effect of minimizing its visual impact from the public view. Having 4 bay windows rather than 2 exaggerates the apparent length of the addition, however, and the one-story extension contributes to this effect. So what have we done? Again, we listened to Mr. Broadleaf and the other board members, but again, most fully and succinctly stated by Mr. Broadleaf, and going back to this image from the 20s. And then we listened to Mr. Studenroth. Whether or not the architectural program for the proposed 2-story wing can be further modified with fewer bay windows, it is recommended that the northernmost extension be greatly reduced in length and/or eliminated by relocating it to the west facade, thereby shortening the length of the proposed east facade. These changes to the design bring the proposed addition into conformity with the documented history as well as the preservation objectives for this significant Southampton Village landmark. So we listened to, the same way we listened to Mr. Broadleaf and the board members in our redesign here, we then listened to Mr. Studenroth, and as you'll see, you can see in the latest iteration, and as Ms. Loga will show you, we have taken the northerly 1-story addition and moved it over to the west, therefore doing exactly what has been recommended by your consultant, which has the effect of shortening the easterly elevation. Now Mr. Fox has been patient. He's only been able to learn what's happening at these board meetings by both watching the videos, listening to my blow by blow, which is probably tedious at best. So I'm glad we're able to see how this actually works. Mr. Fox, if you could come up and just give us a little bit of thoughts about your history with the house and what your goals are.
Good evening. I appreciate you taking the time to hear a little bit of background on my experience with the house and kind of what we want to do with the house and kind of the spirit of it. And I think that, one of the things I was thinking about as I think here is a lot of familiar faces. And I think that I get it. I mean, we bought a historic home. We knew when we were purchasing the home, we were buying a historic home. And when I bought the house, I probably bought for a lot of the same reasons that all of you fight for everything about what makes Southampton great in many ways as it relates to the aesthetics of this place, and debate small things about signs to very substantial things like the really important houses that were built 100+ years ago in this community. And I think that I didn't buy this house with any expectation that this wasn't an important, great house, and it's a great home for us. And we bought it because we love the community. And for us, the community aspect of it is all the things that make it aesthetically great. It's also the neighbors, the people we live with, raising a family here, And we've got, young kids like a lot of people do. We have one on the way, which is why my wife isn't here tonight. And what I think I want to make clear is that, we didn't buy this house with the intent of pushing the envelope on what you could do with the house. We did a lot of research prior to buying the house. We've used multiple land use attorneys in town. Wayne Bruin advised me when I bought the house. We've used Gil Flanagan in some of the different dealings we've had. And of course, now we're using John Bennett. And along the way, one of the things that, is a consistent conversation is, what can we do with the house? Recognizing from a zoning perspective that, we're close to the wetlands with Lake Agawam there. And and B, that we have this historic house on a really nice piece of land that you can see from a lot of different places. And frankly, we knew the community would have a say in the matter. And we bought the house because we loved the community and we wanted to be a part of it. We bought the house because we love this historic old house, and it's something that we thought we'd get a lot of joy out of repairing and restoring. We bought the house because we understood what was happening in the neighborhood prior, so meaning what had been done in terms of additions close to the wetlands, what had been done historically with historic homes in the area, and we understood what the parameters were, and we also understood that this process wasn't going to be something that we got to choose all by ourselves, meaning, we couldn't go and work with an architect and designer, decide what we wanted this house to look like, and then just go build it. Like, that wasn't what we signed up for. We signed up to live in this community, we signed up to be a positive part of this community, and we signed up to work with the powers that be, as well as our neighbors, to get to a design that we would feel great about, that we could live in, and that also would make this a great home for the community. And I think there is, to a certain degree, any of us that own historic homes in this community, I think those are homes that there is an obligation to maintain them and restore them and keep them in a way that's consistent with the history of this town. And I think that there's, a lot of generations that have done that over the years, and we'd like to contribute to it. If you look at what we've done here, where we started, where we've come to, over a year ago, we sent the plans to our neighbors, and we got input from those neighbors, and as you know, the plans have been modified substantially along the way. And we spent the better part of the summer with a lot of our neighbors. We got to know new people. We spent time with people that we know. We got input. We made substantial modifications from where it all started in January with the neighbors that we sent it to. I've met with neighbors individually. We've had, listen, there's people we've met here with the Ravens and other folks in the room who came to the house, over the summer for the first time that we met. And it's been, in many ways, while, listen, it is a process and it's intense, it's been a positive process in that we've met a lot of great people, and the house has gotten better. And I think that what you saw from the plans that we proposed that were approved by the ZBA that came in to you to where they are today, they're totally different. Obviously the restoration of the house, which we also got input from the community on, because there were changes that we wanted to make to the historic house that we thought would be aesthetically appealing and create more symmetry, probably closer to what it looked like originally. And the feedback was, hey, part of the character of this area of the estate district is that these kind of quirky things about this house that were added and changed and modified over the years, that's part of the character of this area. And we respect that. And so we ended up making modifications from the plans that we originally filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals and making the historic part of the house, restoring it to its kind of quirky, funky spot that it's in now. And then the next thing we did is we tried to create something with the addition that would be respectful of everybody, our neighbors especially. And listen, we got feedback from you that said, hey, regardless of whether you went out and hired, one of the most well-known historical, modification designers and restorationists in the country, we think this is the way that this place should look. And we think this is much more in line with historic character of what the house looked like. And we think restoring it back to what it looked like in the 20s would be better. And frankly, we think that the new design that's really based exclusively on your input is great. And we're excited about it. We would be excited to build that house. We would be excited to live in the house. And so I think my point here is just to, give you a little bit of background and our interest in being constructive and positive and having a house that when we're done with it is one that as a community other people who don't live there appreciate the historic nature of it and what we've done with the house in terms of the restoration as well as the addition. So it does look appropriate and size appropriate, which, based on all the precedent that we got advised on, it does. And I think, we certainly appreciate the input, and that's really been the directive that we've given to our team along the way is let's work with the community and let's get a finished product in terms of a house that achieves everyone's goals here. And so I thought it would be an important thing to share in terms of our background interests so that you understood where we're coming from.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to some stuff that's a little bit, quite a bit drier and a little bit less of a point of view of the actual human motivation here. I would like Bob Smith to come up and talk about the methodology by which Mr. Smith, who is the actual surveyor of record for the property, has actually conducted extensive land surveys and measurements of the property, explain why, unlike the objectants' classification of the house, Mr. Smith's original calculation of the northerly wing is 32.5 feet is indeed accurate. Bob, if you talk a little bit about your background, because sure. I'm certainly always impressed by it, and I want the board to be as well.
All right. My name is Bob Smith. I'm the current president of Squires Holden, Weisenbarker and Smith here in town. Our firm has been located and serving Southampton since 1903. It's 115 years we've been here. Myself, I personally was licensed in 1976, and I've actively practiced since that time, about 42 years. I previously submitted a diagram to you showing the scaling on the house based on our measurements, physical measurements of the house, the porch, the size of the house, and the windows. I affirm the addition of the existing residence at the time it was built was 32.5 feet. It's my firm belief, and I'll have some drawings to illustrate that in just a moment. Once I examined the diagram furnished by the opposition, Mr. Sammy, I realized the two drawings when overlaid are not the same scale. I know there's a discussion on how they arrived at their scaling. So what we did, we took their photo and took the spacing between the windows, which is 33 feet, and enlarged their drawing to 33 feet.
Can I have those out for you, Bob?
Yeah. Let me just put one on the table. You can pass it out. That's the original drawing. That's the original drawing. That's their original drawing, and then this is the upscaled drawing. That's one set. That's two sets. That's three sets. Okay. If you note, the house has a porch. The porch is 12 feet wide. The first column on the porch lines up directly with, I assume that to be the south side of the house. If you come across the house 40 feet, using that 12 foot as a basis, you come up with 37.5 feet left on the house, on the photograph. Now, when Mr. Sammy did it, they split the house and they created 40 feet, based on what they thought the roof lines were. If you look carefully, there are 4 windows and 4 windows in the original photograph of ours, and then one that we upscaled to be 33 feet from window to window, 33 feet window to window. If you do that, their house then scales to be 46 and a half feet, not 40. So the original drawing was out of proportion. Now, I'll find my little notes here. If you take the house after it's properly scaled, on their drawing, you get 12 feet for the porch, 46 feet for the house, and 27 feet for the addition. That's a total of 85 feet. If you take our drawing, take 12 foot for the porch, 40 foot for the house, 32 and a half feet for the addition, you get 84 and a half feet. So basically, it's the same number, 85, 84 and a half. We're talking about 6 inches here. Theirs is actually scales to be a half foot larger than ours. The final measurement that I concluded to make this decision is look at both my photo and their properly scaled photo and scale from the north side of the house to the chimney. You get 11 feet in both photos. So my conclusion is that their photo was improperly scaled. It's about 83% of what it should be. When you scale it up using the windows and using the chimney, you get the appropriate scale. The addition comes out to be at least 32 and a half feet long. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you,
Like
sir.
a scale, for all kinds of toys.
Bobby, anything else?
Zach, do you want, Zach?
It's a rare occasion to get Mr. Smith.
I don't, it's Greek to me. Okay.
Lisa? One of Lisa's logos, the project architect, also immediately had some concerns about the accuracy of the opponent's scale. So she did submit a letter, have her go through that a little bit, but then I'll have Lisa, as the project architect, take you through the latest revisions.
Just so we know, on the packet you gave us today, the information that you're presenting this evening, is in the packet you gave.
Lisa's letter is there. Bob Smith's, I wanted you to have the benefit of Bob Smith's, in-person testimony. We've handed out these 3 comparative photographs for you. So they're in your hands now. Lisa's photograph is one of the exhibits to my letter today, as well as the elevations. Also, some comparative dimensions, which I want to talk a little bit about quickly after Lisa's done. Comparative dimensions of the houses in the neighborhood. These are all in the letter that I gave you today. Lisa, if you could tell us about the measurements, I'm particularly interested in that, but you'll take it through the way you want to, and then also if you could take us through the new elevation.
Sure. So I also was interested in how the opposition was coming up with different numbers than us. So I took a look at the photograph, and I spoke with Bob Smith about this as well. You can tell that this photograph is not taken dead on. And the reason that you can tell that is because the gable, that is east-facing gable, does not line up with the chimney that is in the middle of the roof. If this picture was taken face dead on straight, those 2 things would line up. So the fact that they don't line up is proof that the photographer was standing slightly off from being dead on to the picture. So we've scaled that as being about 24 inches off. So I took that, and using the roof plan of the existing house, I located the center of the gable, I offset 24 inches, and then I angled the plan to see actually how far off of an angle it really was. And so it's actually 7.25 degrees off is how the photographer was standing when he took that picture. Obviously, he didn't know that this was going to be used 100 years later. So I just wanted you to understand that I think part of the reason that the opposition is scaling the picture wrong is because, this picture, when you blow it up, things get very blurry and distorted. The darkness here, they're assuming that the darkness that's on the sides of these windows is actually the wall of the house. But as you can see, there's 4 feet worth of south-facing wall that they're actually picking up as a darkness in this picture. So they're using the wrong center line. They're using the gable of the house as a center line as opposed to the chimney. And then they're trying to kind of mirror that over. And it's compounding their problem. Their center line is wrong, so their scale is wrong. Then they're trying to double that. It just compounds the problem. And that's kind of how they're ending up with the wrong dimensions. What they assume to be 40 feet is incorrect. That gives them a scale, and then they're using an incorrect scale to try to determine what the addition was. So I think Bob Smith's plans prove that. This plan also shows you how that happens. You can see 4 feet of that south-facing wall, and that's the reason that it looks like there's more wall on one side than on the other. So that's one of the problems. Mr. Foster also attempts to use this aerial photo. He's using a supersized scale for something so long, so tiny in this picture. So he explains that he's using, there's 6 points, if you will, equals his 40 feet. That means that 1/16 of an inch in this scale equals just under 7 feet. You can't come to any kind of a determination when the pencil thickness is equal to almost 2 feet. You just can't, you can't make any kind of real determination on that. So they have a few problems going. I think Bob's pictures explain it quite well, but in my letter, I go into each one of these points and I explain how they're viewing it wrong. They're taking the wrong point, and they're not taking into account the fact that the house is actually angled from the person. So there's a perspective issue going on, and a mirroring issue, if you will.
You see what I think is the elevation?
Sure.
I also want to emphasize the fact that we don't think it's a great moment, as long as we have tried to keep within the vernacular and tried to keep the sizing appropriate, the difference in measurement. But we just wanted to let you know that we feel we're spot on with the measurements of the addition as it was, and that the opponent's measurements are, to be kind, distorted.
So I went through the plans and the elevations last time, and we spoke about this 2-story addition to the north, and we had this 1-story guest suite down here on the north end. Based on Zach's reports, I can understand how he felt that east facade was looking too long. So I went back, I've shortened that east facade so that it's only that 7 feet that most people seem to agree was actually there at one point in time as a 1-story addition.
Including Mr. Foster.
Including Mr. Foster. And I've swung the guest bedroom around to the west-facing side, so it will not be visible in any way, shape, or form from the east or from the south. So as you can see, this is the east elevation, and the south elevation does not change either from what it looks like now, really, or from the last proposal that we had. The west facade, you can see that 2-story mass is still there, and the 1-story guest wing has just bumped in front of it with a little hipped roof, very similar to all the porch roofs. Do you not have it?
I don't know. It was just, we haven't had a chance to look at
It's in
this.
front of you, it's in your packet. But
Well, I'd like to look at it in front of me,
This is the
Mr.
first
Bennett.
time we're all having the opportunity. It's the
Okay.
first time we're all having the opportunity to see the plans.
So I'm trying to find in here.
To the applicant's request, it will be adjourned so that everyone, including the community and the neighborhood, can see the file fully. In which
Okay.
case we would have time to really dissect everything that's been proposed.
So I modified the plan, the first floor plan, to accommodate the relocation of the west wing here. I also modified the second floor plan to allow me to have 3 windows across the second floor on the east elevation. Again, a recommendation from Mr. Studenroth. And I actually, it does, I think that the rhythm is better, and I think that it does look, and it actually makes it look smaller. Isn't that funny?
Excuse me, so this is the 1920s?
Correct.
Okay, just trying to get it. And so this is only 2 windows, that's correct?
There's only 2 windows there.
And what are
correct.
you claiming that the distance is, what's the difference?
The distance of what?
The
This is still 32 and a half feet.
The windows we measured are the 4 windows in the front of the house.
I'm asking for the distance that, this distance as opposed to this distance.
They're both 32 and a half feet long.
They are, they're the
Correct.
same size?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
You can see there's more wall in between those 2 windows.
Right, I just am swamped in pieces of paper and I haven't seen this stuff. I'm trying very hard to follow.
This is kind of the key, really, if you would. That's the 1920s version, and that's our proposed version. Same
Right.
scale.
If you can set that flat so that the camera can pick it up.
So those are the 2 changes that we made. You know, again, this
Charlie, if you can
2-story
zoom in on the comparison between
The one in the middle.
you can zoom in, please.
So the 2-story addition is just under 25 feet high. You know, the existing 3-story roof line is 43 and change high. So the addition is much lower, 10 feet lower than code allows.
How about the first-story addition on the Wesley?
The 1st-story addition is about 16 feet high, pretty much the height of an accessory structure. So that's about it in terms of the changes that were made, and they were made after we received Mr. Studenroth's comments on Friday. That's the reason that you just got them.
Right.
Go for it. Wait, John, wait.
No, I'm not
Do you have a
saying
question?
Yes, I have some
John,
questions.
just give a second. We have some board.
So the
I'm not saying
lattice, is this,
The lattice on
is
the porch?
that, yeah. Does that have anything to do with the lattice that's on this picture?
It
It seems
again,
more enclosed to me, and I think one of the great parts of the house is the brooding kind of sweep of the porch coming down, but I could be wrong. So
it is reminiscent of the lattice that
yeah, it
was
just
there.
seems like there's an awful lot of it.
Okay.
And are the windows, I mean, how many, are we saving the windows here? How many windows, are the windows getting saved?
The windows need to, the windows do not meet energy code in any way, shape, or
So the
form.
style and the,
They will be exactly what's there.
okay.
Don't feel overwhelmed. This is
No,
not going to be approved
no, but I
tonight.
like to be able to ask questions, you know, it's
Well,
helpful.
that's why we
We're
wanted you to
giving time.
have it tonight, so that you could ask any questions, and then you'll have time to digest it.
Right. Well, I looked at all the stuff that I had, but now I have new stuff. Thank you.
Before we proceed, any other board member have anything else they wish to say? Jeff?
Not in terms of the submissions, no.
And what is this? What is with these windows? What is this?
Those are actually existing,
They are.
yes.
Cool. Okay. But then you have these crosshatched ones. Those aren't the same, are they?
Those are not the same. Those are not, well, those are on the addition. Those are
And that's to
little,
make, yeah.
they're smaller, you know, the windows on the house are nice size,
Right.
double hung
They
windows.
have that weird grid.
That's to tie in with the other smaller diagonal
And
tie.
so, and there's cross hatching on these ones up here too, in these, is that
Yes,
new?
the 3rd floor, those are existing.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
Okay.
the 3rd floor has diagonal paned windows.
Cool.
All the
Okay,
3rd
okay.
floor windows
I
are
just-
diagonal
It's
paned.
very hard I see them.
Would it be helpful for a diagram, because you're
No.
coming back anyway? No, what I'm saying is diagram what is existing and what we changed. Would that be helpful?
Well, I think,
We could
I mean,
take a
if you-
yellow pencil.
Yeah, I think if you kind of,
I'm getting at it.
addition,
Understood, but just so that for the naked eye to see and those that are looking, instead of just sitting here doing a comparison between the two photos, if there could be some type of diagram showing what's existing, what's being removed, what's being altered, I think it would be.
but just keep in mind that all of the windows, all of the details that are on the existing three-story house will be,
They're like in kind, but they'll be replaced.
yes,
Okay,
in
that's-
exactly the same fashion as what's there.
And then you've mimicked the diagonals in the addition, is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Where
So
you,
they speak to each other.
Susan, anything else?
not at the moment.
Okay. Jeff, anything?
Not on the submission, no.
Christine?
No,
Okay.
I mean, thank you for responding to Zach's report with this.
Now, Zach, some of the, I'm sorry, were you done?
If you don't have any other questions?
Zach, there's a response to some of the comments you made at the last meeting, response by the applicant. Whether you feel it's just at this point to make any comment or dissect it, spend some time reviewing, looking over it, then coming back at the next meeting and discussing it in detail.
Well, I don't want to prolong it unnecessarily, because many people want to speak. I just want it noted that I had presented an updated report, which was reviewed and incorporated into this most recent presentation. And so rather than going into this is in the file. Anyone who wants to read it can do so. I think the basic points that I was trying to make is that this project, as far as I was concerned, was never about reproducing an old house the way it used to stand or the way it used to look. That's an unrealistic requirement of any project. I think it's fortunate that a substantial addition had existed, and I think I used the word at some point that could become an inspiration for what was being presented. So we're not talking about reconstructing something, and that gets into the math. How long was it? How short was it? How wide was it? Et cetera. I find it interesting that the 1926 Sanborn map, which is the only floor plan, okay, not an elevation, not a fuzzy distant across the lake elevation, but rather a very precise plan. And you have to read the legend for these maps. Like, what does an X mean? What's that little O? Well, the 2 stands for two-story dwelling. The X stands for shingle roof. The next 2 stands for two-story addition, and the O stands for tin roof. That was the flat roof. I'm not an architect, and I don't have your little calipers and stuff. But from this floor plan, it looks to me as if the extension was virtually the same length as the original house. This was not being done with the precision that 100 years later someone could come along and make a determination on. But I think it's a visual indication of what the size of that was. The only recommendations that I had made based upon this original earlier presentation was that having 4 windows on that second story kind of accentuated how long it was. It was long enough to have 4 windows. Okay, so I suggested if the interior program could be revised in such a way that there were fewer windows, it might appear shorter. But more importantly, that additional 1-story extension that just added another 22 feet to that facade was just kind of adding to that obvious length. And it's something, if something could be done with that, that would be beneficial. So I think what's been presented tonight, which everyone will want to review, has really addressed those 2 specific issues, and I think quite successfully. The one thing that you have going in your favor is the extraordinary height of this house. Because you can put a 2-story addition on this building, and it is still subservient to this towering original house. If the house were more diminutive to begin with, that addition would appear larger in proportion. So I think that's just a fortunate fact of the architecture. But I feel that they're really addressing the issues of scale and detailing, et cetera.
And to your point with the size, so the existing house is 40 feet, I guess I should use, The existing house is 40 feet long. The two-story portion is 32 and a half feet long, and this little bump out is 7 feet, so this is actually 6 inches shorter
Pretty much.
than the existing.
That's what that.
So it's actually now shorter, even with the one-story portion added
Right.
to it, it's now shorter than the existing three-story portion is there. And then, of course, this mass is further enlarged by the 12-foot
extension,
porch
that
sticking
side.
off, so you've really got 52 feet here to 39 and a half feet.
So that's my only input.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to recommend to the board, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, because I know there are going to be people who want to give comment and give review, or want to have the opportunity to see what has been presented this evening and make an educated
I understand.
either rebut or a challenge to what's being presented. So I want to give that opportunity to do so, and then if you want to finish and do a closing, then
Well,
just to wrap things up.
hopefully I would...
Because what's going to happen is they're going to speak and you're going to say
No, I
something
was
else.
hoping to obviate the need for a closing by just finishing off the couple of comments. I was going to ask our historic consultant to come up, say just a very short few words, but while he's coming up...
Is he saying anything in addition to what's
Yes,
already been
yes,
discussed?
because it's responsive to the new design. But while he's coming up, please do come up, Joel. This whole argument about us not respecting some hypothetical historic spacing is just a chimera. It's absurd. It has no basis in law. It's sort of an embarrassing thing that's been put forward by the objectants. Setbacks are what you look at. And to suggest that somehow these other houses in the area have been respective of some historic spacing is just absurd. The facts prove it. This new proposal, 65 feet, this new proposal will be 65 feet from the closest boundary, which is the Gifford property. Obviously, the Giffers were not concerned about historic spacing when they brought their addition of their house 27.3 feet from the 472 property. Nor were the Stevens when they brought their house within a certain distance. So
So
you'll see
these are part of the file here.
part of the files.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
It goes to keeping in character of the neighborhood. You can see that look at the bottom line, there's a comparison with 472 and the surrounding neighbors.
Thank you.
Good evening, Joel Snodgrass, One View Place, Huntington. Just two things really, I want to keep this brief. One is, John made the comment that they've actually listened to my recommendations to them, which is a very nice thing to happen because often it requires suggesting that changes should be made. I just wanted to reinforce that this design team has been very, very receptive to hearing comments of what may or may not be appropriate, and sometimes it flies in the face of what the design is suggesting, and that Mr. Fox has been very supportive of this as well. This has been a morphing process, if you can imagine, and it's required cooperation, and they have had a very cooperative spirit as far as this goes. The other is that, I mean, you're seeing that there's an effort here trying to comply with ARB recommendations and input, and of course that's extremely helpful because it's trying to guide this in an efficient way that's respectful of everybody's concerns. I will say to you, and part of what was handed in tonight was a packet of information from myself, really looking at compliance with the local guidelines and with the national standards. And just to summarize it, essentially, there are 10 national standards, 9 of which could apply to this set of proposed additions. One does not because it relates to archaeological findings and preservation of archaeological findings. So in that sense, it's really not applicable unless something's uncovered, and obviously if it was, that would be dealt with appropriately. But 9 of the 9 that do apply are actually met by this process, including, as Zach has already pointed out, through setbacks, through variation of design changes, through an alternate placement of chimneys, through different fenestration patterns, and so on and so forth. Even the small addition also meets that through using simplicity, subservient design, lower roof height that still reflects the original building, and so on. So there has been a very conscious effort to try to weave in compliance when this design was put forth. And I'll leave the document to speak to those points, and of course you can, if there are questions, you can ask me the next time. But I just wanted to reinforce that the comments that had been made before by the opposition, some of these I think were very correct in terms of the previous design, and we took that very seriously. And so what has come forth now is tried to really seriously look at that and tried to address that to the best degree possible.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. You have a question?
I have a question for you, Mr. Snodgrass.
Sorry about that.
So in the past 2 weeks, I've just been having a very hard time with this entire application, sort of going over in my head what the 1880s version of Mocamonto, the original version, looked like, which was that it was very vertical, it wasn't encumbered by additions. And somehow we've morphed into the 1920s. And I just wondered, I realized that, I don't know, I'm having a problem with that, actually, because I believe that the history of these early buildings, cottages, and this being perhaps the most prominent and important one, if not one of the earlier ones, is really the sort of core of what was the beginning of Southampton as a resort community. And so this is, by the time we get to the 20s, people are, they've made the house a whole lot bigger, which is what this is about too. And I mean, what are your feelings about that in terms of the historical nature of the building?
Well, and actually part of what's in the standards addresses that every phase of a building's history should be respected in its own right. The thing that's interesting or unusual in this case is that part of this building was put on, then taken off, put elsewhere in the property, morphed in different ways, and now, interestingly, we're proposing to actually bring it back. And there's two elements actually to think about here. One is that typically, as has been pointed out, imitation of an original structure is not supported.
Right.
But that's between the original historic structure and not mimicking or copying it. Obviously, this wing didn't do that to begin with. It was entirely different when it was first put on in 1897. And so anything that goes back that's a replicate to it, which is what this is also not anywhere near what the original design was. So it's a slightly different interpretation, and I tried to explain that into the documents that I submitted. But that premise in the standards that talks about trying to look at any individual phase that occurs in the building's history means that the history gets interpreted in different ways. Where this differentiates in terms of how this is approached between, say, a private residence and a house museum is the idea of restoration. So restoration in its truest sense being going back to a specific time period and therefore trying to represent physically what everything was in that time period. And sometimes that means removing elements to try to represent that, such as Williamsburg, where they wiped out an entire town to make a replica town. In Williamsburg, we all love Williamsburg, but there was a price to be paid. So in terms of private residences, normally that's not the approach that you're taking, is to say it needs to go back to a time or such. Interestingly, this approach is actually, to me, and to my mind or way of thinking, this is actually quite unique because it's actually bringing it back to represent three phases of its history: its original form or modified original form, to be fair, of what we see right now is a building that actually is shorter than what it was originally and also had even its first north extension by 1 bay chopped off. So it's a morphed and actually reduced size of what it was originally. And yet, what we have the opportunity to do, in some ways, is now take it partially back to what at least the east facade was. We're not altering the west. But by trying to morph that, we're actually able to show three phases, which, by the addition of the guest suite in the rear, is showing what is now the modern interpretation. So, from my way of thinking, preservation is often a very fluid and adaptive process, depending on the individual circumstances. And that's actually how the standards are always supposed to be applied, is on a case-by-case and depending on what the influences of the specific area that you're in take into account. So I tend to look at it as it's not necessarily my opinion to say what's right or wrong. What I try to do is always look at it in terms of how does it meet the standards in terms of the way they are presented and applied in this context, this specific context. So I think there's room for that type of interpretation.
I think using the same, one could use the same argument to say it should be the original house, or it should be viewed in the context of today.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question.
That's pretty, so in the same way you're selecting 1920 and saying it combines various elements, I would say that somebody could very well argue, and I'm not going to argue it now because we have stuff to look at, and I'm sure there will be others who will choose to speak. But what I'm saying is the same argument, which is your opinion as to what it reflects and where you want to put the stake in the ground, as I said in the last meeting, is a matter of opinion. So one could use the same argument, I'm saying, to say, as Susan was presenting, or at least proposing, that it should be the original house. Or maybe one could use that argument and say that all that stuff means absolutely nothing because it no longer looks like this. And there are now other houses. So, it takes, so anyway, all I'm just saying is your same argument, in my mind, can be used to argue the counter.
Well, I guess the way I would respond to that is the processes I have witnessed and understood here is one where a proposed addition was recommended, and for whatever reasons, right or wrong, what came back was that was unacceptable. And what would be an acceptable process to follow for inspiration or for direct use was the image which included the 1897 edition, which is in the circa 1920 view that we all know so well, which is this one right here. And in good faith, the design team was responding to try to respect that recommendation in the most appropriate way. And obviously now we're here at least one incarnation further, which has taken additional input and responded to that. So I suppose you could have any of these discussions at any time and argue the merits of whether they're right or wrong. But in terms of the morphology of any building and any site, it typically means that you're going to get changes, and that normally means that you're going to get additions. It's less often that you're going to get things taken away, which is ironically the history at this site. But that has no bearing on whether that should happen again or if it was right or wrong. That's just a factor of what happened. So in my experience in the preservation field, when it comes to development, it's always been a case of there's compromise. And as I had mentioned earlier in my comments about property rights and so on, it's really more recognizing that this is the natural process of sites. And it's actually stipulated even in the design guidelines here that development is actually not something to discourage, but to do it in a proper way and to manage it properly. So I look at these things as you're going to be facing these most often and most likely, and so therefore the appropriate thing to do is to find an appropriate way to manage it for a successful applicant. And that's why you have the guidelines, and that's why I think the process of the ARB is so valuable to this, because you provided us with very good recommendations, which the design team has done their very best to try to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
No questions? Anything? Christine, do you have anything? All right. Is there any public comment on the application? Step forward.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Studenroth, Patrick Fife, Toomey Latham, Shea Kelly, Dubin, and Quattararo, here on behalf of the Chifras and the Stevens, the neighboring property owners. Like you, I was just given these plans tonight, as well as the multiple reports that are contained. I think flipping through, there's like a 17-page report from Mr. Studenroth in here. With all due respect, I mean, my clients are very frustrated with the process that the applicants employed to this point about just putting in new plans at the last minute and not having an opportunity to review them. I mean, my clients have been here at every hearing, all five. This was the first time Mr. Fox came here tonight. But it's frustrating that, we prepared, we expected to have an educated, informed discussion, and we can't have that. So I did want to express that. I do think my clients appreciate what Mr. Fox said tonight about being receptive and being open. But just so it's clear, I mean, my clients have repeatedly asked Mr. Fox just to have a meeting, even as recently as the past week. In fact, I reached out to Mr. Bennett and let him know that my clients were happy to meet together to discuss. So it's just frustrating that there was no discussion. All the requests to have a meeting have gone unanswered. There hasn't been any meeting, and then we're throwing this here tonight. I mean, it was literally just handed to me as Mr. Bennett walked up. So I apologize for not really having an informed, response to everything that's been addressed tonight, and I do appreciate that the board is going to keep things open. But again, my clients are willing to meet. They've said that. They'd like to meet Mr. Fox and have a discussion about some of the things that hopefully then don't have to be discussed in front of you, and we can save everybody here
Well, we always encourage the applicant to reach out to the neighbors. We always encourage that the neighbors reach out to the applicant. We can't enforce it.
I know that, but it's just actions speak louder than words. So to the extent that Mr. Fox is saying that, I think my clients would appreciate it if he followed through and actually have that meeting. I did want to just make sure that you had my submission that I made on January 17th. It was a short 3.5 page letter, I think. There was a 1 or 2 page report from Mr. Foster. So it does appear that you have that, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. I also wanted to submit tonight just a 1 page or page and a quarter letter from David Saskis, surveyor in East Hampton.
I should have that before this evening.
I had asked
Zach, there you go.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Saskis is a well-respected land surveyor, just like Mr. Smith, based in East Hampton. I asked Mr. Saskis to independently evaluate the length of Milcamonto's 1897 Northern Addition. He had confirmed Mr. Sammy's and Mr. Foster's analysis that the addition was 25 feet in length. Significantly, Mr. Saskis is the only expert who scaled the photograph using CAD software. So I know there were comments about the nature of the scale that Mr. Foster used and some suggestion that I think because he and Mr. Sammy were not licensed land surveyors, they weren't capable of scaling the addition. There have been some additional points I know that Mr. Smith raised tonight. We just based it off the photo that the applicant was using in response to our measurements. So, again, I'm responding to what's been given. So I would like the opportunity to have a follow-up response so we could address some of these additional points that were made tonight to see if Mr. Saskis continues to stand by his analysis in light of what the applicant said. But I think his analysis is very clear, and again, I think he's the only one so far that's used some kind of CAD program to measure and accurately depict the length. And I think the measurement is extremely important. I think there's been an understatement as to the importance of the length of the 1897 edition. To make clear, Mr. Snodgrass 2 weeks ago when we were here, said that their goal was to point back to the original size of the 1897 edition. And he said, quote, "We want to try and keep this to the original size, which we fully agree with." And he also said the whole concept that they were trying to focus on was the idea of reinstalling what had been there, but to make slight changes. I think Mr. Saskis' analysis, which shows that the addition was 25 feet in length, not 32.5 feet in length, in part demonstrates that this is not a slight change to the addition. It is one that I think alters Milcamonto significantly and not as little as possible, which is what your code requires. I tried to look through these new plans while I was sitting, and I can't look at the numbers and the distances and actually how large it is, but it does appear, not including the garage, that the footprint is close to the footprint of the original house. So we're not talking about a minimal addition here that doesn't change the scale and massing. Wherever you put this addition, it still has a significant impact on the scale and the massing of the...
Just lower the volume on everyone's phone.
Get it out of my pocket.
Okay, if we can just lower the volume on everyone's phone.
I'll just turn it off.
Better.
So I don't have, I'm going off the visual test. I don't have stats to sit here and tell you based on what we've got.
I think we were all very animated about the fact that we received information today. You obviously would need some time to bring your own professional and expert to look it over and to attest to whether the accuracy of the information. Didn't expect you to have response to it, and that's the reason why we're trying to get things moving.
I think I just wanted to get a couple general points out that I think apply to this proposal and to the prior proposal. I mean, first, there's nothing in the code, as you know, that suggests that this board has to balance an applicant's needs for a larger house, a need for certain rooms, a need for a first-floor bedroom.
But there's also no prohibitions to stop an applicant from increasing the size of their home.
Well, there are prohibitions insofar as what your guidelines provide, and that it has to be within the guidelines of historic preservation. I agree there's no bright line rule that says you can't have a first floor bedroom. Obviously, that's not the case, but it has to be historically appropriate.
Correct.
And I think Mr. Fox, to his credit, made some good points. I mean, he admitted that he didn't buy a building envelope. He bought a very historic home. He was aware of the fact that it was a very historic home, and I don't think that issue's ever been in dispute, and that it's one of the most significant homes with respect to the establishment of the Southampton Summer Colony. But I think that's a key point, and this board has every right to treat this application on its own and affect differently from some other. You have to look at each case in a unique way, and each house in a unique way. And I think the Department of Preservation's guidelines, and I think some of the commentary that we provided to you speak to just that. The commentary that I gave you in the January 17th letter from the Technical Preservation Services talks about every historic building is different, and each rehabilitation project is unique. And furthermore, and this is the Department of the Interior speaking, not me, quote, "The choice of treatment depends on a variety of factors, including the property's historical significance." So the historical significance of the structure is extremely important, and it is something I think that you have to look at critically when you're determining the size, scale, and mass of an addition. So I think in some, whether this is an addition that's now spread out over the northern elevation and the western elevation, or previously it was just over the northern elevation, it is a significant addition that I don't think alters Mocamonto in as minimal way as it possibly could. I think, as Mr. Foster pointed out in his most recent submission, and I think Ms. Stevenson was getting at this in part, but the temporary expansions of Mocamonto in the past, these wings that were taken off and removed, they were primarily for commercial purposes. For potentially a rooming house use with respect to the north. I think Mr. Bennett even had said that at one point during one of the earlier hearings. I don't think those present the basis for a modern day expansion. I think that's what Mr. Foster pointed out in his most recent report, especially when the property was radically different at the time. The house was situated on 8 acres, not 2 acres. We've been through it. There was no pool house. There was no garages being proposed today. The landscape was very different. So I think whether or not this addition is split between, again, northwest or it's just on the north elevation, look at it this way. The applicant, and I don't know for sure, but they're basically trying to double the footprint of the original house, where that house is now on 2 acres and it was previously on 8 acres. What? That's not historically appropriate. So again, I'd like the opportunity with my clients to look at these plans in much more detail, but just on the eye test alone, again, you're doubling the footprint of the existing the primary existing historic structure on now a much smaller property. And I think in and of itself, on that basis, it's not historically appropriate. So that's all I have for tonight. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to coming back, hopefully addressing these plans and not something else that's given to us on the way in the door.
We would hope.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, as stated by the applicant, some time's going to be needed for both the community as well as this board to really digest the information that's been given. Even Zach definitely would, I know we had a very quick evaluation and discussion over it, but please read over it to see if there's anything in addition to the report you've given that you feel needs to either be updated or altered. Anything further from the board?
Not at the moment.
Anything further from?
No.
Okay.
Are you taking this?
All of that is going to go in the file. Therefore, the motion would be to approve applicant's request to adjourn until our next meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant at 472 First McLean request to adjourn to our next meeting.
I second the motion.
Motion by Christina, a second by Susan. All in favor, Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Curtis is aye as well. Thank you. I know it's going to be a quick shift, so let's give 2 minutes for the shift to happen.